Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelly Wells. I'm the Executive Director of KDHX. I'm here with Gary Pearson, who is the President of the Board of Directors. Welcome, Gary.
Good morning.
We are excited to be here today. We know there is a lot going on at KDHX and a lot of changes that are happening, and so we want to just be able to talk about those and share what we're going on, how we see what's going on at the station. And we did put out a call for questions, so we have some questions we're going to answer as well.
Yeah, it's exciting to be here and to be talking about all this. I've always known that I had a face for radio, and so it's nice to be taking advantage of that finally.
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
really gotten a chance to do that before, but it's great to be here with you and to talk about these things that we're going to dive into today.
Yeah, exactly. Really important things. And, I think as we think about and maybe perhaps some of what we've been talking about even here during Drive, maybe things folks would have been hearing on the station. We've been talking a lot about the future of KDHX, and as we do that, I also want to take a moment to just acknowledge also the pain that's being experienced from the current situation. The fact that we've parted ways with some folks, the fact that this looks and feels different to folks, and they're missing the people that they've been used to hearing. So I want to just acknowledge that and acknowledge that it is painful. And so we're in this space of there's some pain, and then there's also the idea of where is KDHX going?
Yeah, I think that is really important, and it's something that I've definitely been experiencing, the sadness of that, not just this week, but throughout the last 6 or 7 months. There's been a lot of pain and a lot of sadness around change. Change is one of the most difficult things for us to deal with, I think, as humans, even though it's the most present force. Everything is impermanent, right? So we're all experiencing change all the time, but it's still hard. And I think we just have to embrace that and accept it and go forward. So.
Well, one of the things that I want to just start by saying is just that we are committed here to the future of KDHX. I know that you and I both love and respect the station. I also know that it may not look or feel that way to folks. So I want to just mention how much we both appreciate what music can do, the power of KDHX to harness music, the way that it can connect us in a way that, in my opinion, no other art form really does.
Yeah, I always exaggerate it that it's the only thing that's ever changed the world, but I think I actually do kind of believe it. The power of that of music and that art and the love that it inspires and the way it moves people to do things who are actually the ones who change the world, of course. But this is a place that has celebrated the love of music for a very long time. Mm-hmm. That's why I believe everybody involved and associated with it on every level is involved or associated with it, whether it's a listener, a donor, a DJ, another volunteer, an employee, a board member.
Yeah.
All of those people, all of those groups, that's what motivates them, I think. And it's certainly what motivates me. I've spent literally hundreds of hours in not just the last 6 or 8 months, but over 7 or 8 years now. There have been a lot of times when a lot of time and effort and work has been required to do what this station needs to be able to provide that forum for the love of music to continue. And that's what I'm motivated by.
Yeah.
It's you put in situations where you have to make hard decisions, but the motivation and the reason that we do it is what allows us to power through those and make decisions that are difficult sometimes.
Absolutely. And we're certainly not acting on our own here. I mean, this is, as you mentioned, this is a jewel. It's been here for a long time. And
so many other people.
Many of the decisions, even over the years, we have worked hard to have the community input for those as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about a lot of this stuff. We're going to get into a lot of it, and we did ask y'all for questions. So we had 243 people that filled out our online forum. So 243 responses that we received. About 50 of those responses contained actual questions. So as we looked at the questions, we realized that there were some central themes to a lot of them. So we kind of grouped them into themes, and we want to speak to many of those themes. And hopefully, as folks listen, y'all will be able to hear your question answered. But we will also be answering some specific questions as well. So let's dive into the current situation here at KDHX.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that those questions certainly illustrated where people wanted to understand more or learn more. And obviously we can't answer 50 questions or even 240, or certainly not 243, but it's great to see the themes come out and the things that people are interested in hearing more about. I think we can sort of set the stage for that a little bit, and then the questions can be more meaningful to talk about really why we are at this moment. I've described this as a crossroads moment for KDHX a couple of weeks ago, and I still believe we're there at that point. It's a situation that started several months ago. Earlier this year, we parted ways with a longtime volunteer DJ on this station, someone that a lot of people listened to for a long time. He made a lot of great radio for a very long time. We've spoken pretty publicly about the reasons for that, and we certainly stand by that. Those were that was a decision that followed a process that took a lot of time and a lot of people were involved in. The board, the staff, some outside help with that as well, in terms of trying to go through conflict and manage differences of opinion and things that we needed to address. Ultimately, the decision was made that there was just some behavior and some things that we couldn't have in the organization. And in order to be true to what we say we are and we are becoming, we had to part ways with someone. That's, as we've said now multiple times, that was sad. It was a decision that we had to make, and we made, and we stand behind it. And it's a decision that a small group of people really resisted. And since that time, they have been making demands that were not things that we could do, and not things that we could tolerate. An approach of demanding and holding hostage an organization based on disagreeing with one decision. Now, there's a lot of nuance there in terms of things that they did, things that they said, efforts that were made, lawsuits that were filed, meetings that were held, all kinds of things. But it's all centrally based around disagreement with one opinion or one decision. The board and the board of directors of any corporation, and KDHX Double Helix Corporation is a corporation. It's a nonprofit corporation, but that board is charged with the same responsibility for managing the organization and doing what is in the best interest of the long-term health of the organization. Every member of the board of directors has that obligation. That means making hard decisions, and that means doing what is required when it's not popular. So the fact that that decision was unpopular, certainly, and extremely unpopular with a small group of people, to the extent that they were willing to do anything to overturn it. And that is really what led us to this situation. The things that they demanded and that they did, and that as part of that, were not compatible with continuing to move forward as an organization with who we are.
Well, and you're talking about decisions, and I think just to break down a little bit, we want very much to be in dialogue. Of course we do. And I think that's one of the things that underscores many of the values of the organization. And as we evolve and grow, understanding how we can do that in radical ways, and how this is not about, it's actually not about disagreeing. It's not about,
right.
Is there conflict? Conflict can be healthy. Conflict is important in a lot of ways to make us consider different scenarios. I mean, we talk a lot among the staff about creating a culture of dissent. You can dissent. You can say, why is this decision being made? Should we look at this a different way? Are we sure that we're using frameworks of our values to make this decision? So this is the idea of disagreements are actually pretty healthy, and we need to have a lot of different ideas at the table to be able to move forward. Otherwise, we're just a group of folks with one idea, which means we're definitely going to be excluding someone. I mean, I think that's more of a cult scenario, right? That if you're saying, oh, we can bring different ideas to the table because we have a common goal in mind,
right?
That's what movements are, So we have, we have had a lot of efforts at dialogue over the course of the last few months, and many of those have broken down, unfortunately, as we try to be in dialogue with folks who were very frustrated. And I think we should be blunt about the response from a small group of volunteers to the decision to part ways with the DJ earlier this year was a line in the sand. It was, this is what has to happen,
right?
And unfortunately, that response is a bit of a historical response here at KDHX.
It's happened before.
Right.
Yeah, there's been a pattern of when people are angry, they demand that employees be fired. They demand that changes be made. And that's, those demands can be voiced. There's nothing wrong with voicing that demand. But at some point, there is an incompatibility with demanding that people be fired and continuing to be involved with the organization. Most people, if they were in their professional workplace, if they continued to demand that the manager, the assistant manager, the president, whoever they don't like, be fired, eventually there would come a point where they just wouldn't be able to work there anymore. It wouldn't be compatible. It wouldn't be an environment that would work. And this is in many ways very different from that, but it's I think a helpful analogy to think about when the response is cyclically the same. Someone's mad, fire someone. That's not debate. I love to debate. I am an arguer. I went to law school.
So you could argue?
Partially so I could argue and not get in trouble for it because I always did it at home. I like to exchange ideas and debate things. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between a debate and a mob. And when a mob demands something and demands a certain result, and doesn't really, it doesn't matter what the counter arguments are, or what the responses are, what the reasons are. That's not a debate. And we have to be able to exchange ideas, and we have to be able to have people believe us when we say we are acting in good faith, trying to do what's best for the organization. You may disagree with it. That's okay.
Yes.
But we need to have an assumption of common goodwill and a common belief that we're trying to do what's best. And that just broke down, and it wasn't happening. Some of the things that I hadn't personally been involved in before in terms of the resolution process and mediation, and that the things that we've tried to do here were they just weren't successful, unfortunately. It was a new process for me to go through, but it didn't produce a result where people were talking to each other. It produced a result where they were kind of continuing, the people were continuing to demand things and have things be one way and not have any possibility for any type of actual exchange of common values or ideas, is certainly how I experienced it. I had a lot of conversations with people about this. I had a lot of angry messages and voicemails and emails, and they continue to come in. But there hasn't been nearly enough actual productive conversation, and that was frustrating. So,
one of the great privileges I think that we get to hold in our roles here at the station is that the effort and the ability to try to be responsive to all volunteers and to hold that for all volunteers. And, I think one of the things that we need to say is that not all volunteers are making the same demands. Not all volunteers feel the same way about their experience at the station or where they would like to see this situation resolve. Right. And so that is one of the things that as we try to show up every day in our integrity, making the wisest and best decisions we can, even if we fail at those.
Yeah.
Because we do fail.
Yeah.
We certainly, not every decision that's made here is, quote, right or wrong. We make mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
But as we show up every day and try to do that, our goal here is that we are holding what we know and know from being shared with from the larger group of volunteers. And I think from a larger group of a listening audience as well. So, while sometimes it seems like situations can be black and white, we also have to say, well, actually, they aren't necessarily that way. And there are a lot of different ideas and opinions. So I think, as we think about how we move forward together, the idea of ultimatums, a line in the sand, doesn't allow for the type of dialogue that we would want, especially if that line in the sand is on behalf of a larger group of people that are actually not all for that line.
Right.
So we, one of the questions that we have gotten, and this person mentions just having common ground with programmers that we've parted ways with, which is the love of KDHX with all of our heart. And I appreciate that acknowledgement here from this question. But it is true. This person is saying, it seems that my job as executive director, it says, Kelly, I feel as though your job as executive director is to resolve conflicts peacefully. Right. And I have to be honest, I feel like I agree in a way, and also I think part of my own growth and evolving is understanding that resolution to conflict, yes, peacefully important, but also resolution to conflict doesn't always look like what we think it was. I think a few years ago, I would have said, resolution looks like we have all come to agreement and now we are all moving forward for the same thing.
Right.
And as I've learned more about what that looks like and tried to understand more how healthy conflict can be, I do know that sometimes resolution looks like we didn't all agree, and we actually decided to go our separate ways. And that's something that I wrestle with. I have moments of still needing to be reminded. Resolution doesn't always look like you think it does.
Right.
Because I've certainly have moments of just feeling like a failure or feeling like, what could I have done?
Right.
And one, that's centering myself in a way that's not appropriate for an organization that's made up of so many different moving parts and people.
Right.
That make up an organization, but also realizing resolution doesn't always look like what we think it, and we have to let go of, if we're truly here, we have to let go of our own idea of what resolution looks like if we're here in good faith. And that is a lesson I will learn for the rest of my life, I think, because it is a hard one.
It's very hard. It's very difficult for me to. I don't want to make this, just us all about my feelings here, but I'll share a little bit of it. I mean, genuinely, it's very hard for me to accept the idea that I cannot explain things to people in a way that makes none of them hate me. And I don't feel like that's the case right now. I think I've explained myself and I've tried to do what was right. and some portion of the listeners to those things are expressing pretty deep hatred, and in some expressing that in some ways that I've never experienced, thankfully, and it makes me have an appreciation for maybe people who experience those things more often and more frequently in their life. I'm pretty privileged not to hear that most of the time.
Yeah.
So that's really hard. But I want there to be a space for resolution to mean we've all said the things that we need to say, and we can choose how we're going to coexist.
Right. Right.
And I hope we're moving towards that. Yeah, but I think we're sort of sharing the things that how this has made us feel, and we know that a lot of other people have really strong feelings about that, and I'm really trying to remind myself, how are other people experiencing this?
Right.
How are some of these same people saying the things to and about me? How are they experiencing this? What does this feel like for them?
Right.
That's very imprecise, but just trying to have that perspective of how other people are experiencing it. I think that's important.
Yeah. Well, and we did read, Gary and I both read all 243 responses that we received, and that definitely gave us some insight, for sure. And I think one of the questions that did surface pretty frequently throughout those questions was how are these decisions important for the future of the station? I mean, we've said that these decisions are important for the future of the station. Yeah. How is it that parting ways with volunteers is important for the future of the station? And as we've talked here, I think one thing to pull out is that cyclical nature you were talking about. They're important for the future because this has been part of our history. And the goal here is we continue to learn how to work together to serve St. Louis, to serve our listening audience, and to be together in partnership within our roles at KDHX is that idea of continuing to grow together. I like to go back to that quote a good bit, and I'm going to misquote it because I don't remember it exactly, but the author Simon Sinek says something along the lines of, a definition of community or a group of people who grow together. And as we look at what it means to grow together, that's where we have an opportunity to say growing together does not mean agreement with each other. Growing together means we're going to let go of our particular idea to find the idea that works for us all to move forward in service of our mission. As you mentioned when we started, we're a nonprofit. We do have a mandate here. Yeah. So, I think that's where I would say these decisions for the future of KDHX, even though I do understand that it may not feel or look that way.
Yeah, and it I think can feel sometimes like decisions are being made kind of based on, in any context, like whoever you see as the leader making the decision seems to have all of the choice in the decision. There's a lot of decisions that we've decided not to make, or I'll speak for myself. There's a lot of ideas that I've had and decisions that I've wanted to have happen in this context that were not what happened, and they were not what was decided to be the best for the collective organization. There are things that I've disagreed with. There are things that I have voted against, formally or informally.
Yeah, sure.
And we try to find what the collective group decides, and then go forward supporting that. I always try to center that, whether it was my idea or not. So I think that's important to understand. So we've been talking for a little bit.
We have. Let's play a song.
Yeah, I was going to say, could we maybe?
Yes, and I was as you were talking about that, I was thinking about how we're talking about decisions, but we haven't really talked a lot about frameworks for how we make decisions, or what we mean when we say they're, even who is involved or what that looks like. So before we get to the next subject here, which I think will fall under that, and then also very specific questions about just what our journey's been like since 2019 and 2020.
Yes.
We want to talk about that. Let's play a song, because we're here because we love music. And actually, I'll put a finer point on it. I'm here because I believe that music connects us. I love music because of that. So it's not just the love of music. It's the love of what music can do for us. So do you want to choose a song to play, or you want me to play my song? Which one do you want to do?
Well, I don't know. What do you think we should? What are you feeling like? I've given you my choice. Which one do you feel like is the best? And if it's, I can introduce it, or you can introduce yours.
Why don't you choose one of yours?
Okay. Well, this was a big moment for me to be able to pick a song that would be played on the radio, because music is in my head all the time, everywhere, no matter what's happening. And sometimes it's a song that seems very poignant to the moment. Sometimes it's just what I heard overhead in the grocery store when I was checking out or something. And it's just a soundtrack of everything. So it was really exciting for me to get to pick a couple songs for you. But the song that I picked, Abraham Alexander, is just an artist that I've pretty recently discovered, and a good friend of mine. When I was in Nashville last week, I was talking to the person who kind of introduced me to him as an artist, not actually introduced, but told me about him as an artist. And we were talking about him, so it's just kind of been in my head, this record that he put out this year. So that's just, I think it's a great song, and I love to hear it. So
this is an artist named Abraham Alexander. The album is Sea Suns, SEA, Sea Suns, and the song is Tears Run Dry. Here we go. Okay, let's pretend like I know how to run this board. Maybe not.
My mind now. You're on my mind now.
What I'm missing here. Let me try this again.
Are we not playing?
Well, I don't. Oh, you know what? We might be playing. I don't have my headphones on. I apologize, y'all. I bet that song started and I didn't realize it started. Let me start it again, and I apologize for I forgot that I had my headphones on. Here we go.
My mind now. You're on my mind now. I can get you off. Yeah. Time now. Give you all my time now. 'Cause I can't get enough. I know you're hurting, you're searching, you're longing for something more. Well, this is the part in the movie scene where I take your hand and say, and darling, if you let me love you, and let me hold you, you'll see those tears run dry. And darling, if you let me love you, and let me hold you, you'll see those tears run dry. 'Cause love never gonna be easy. Because love is never gonna be easy. Darling, if you let me love you, and let me hold you, you see those tears run dry. Oh, I wonder if you could let your walls come down. Oh, what my love could give if you would let me be around. I know you're hurting, you're searching, you're longing for something more. Well, this is the part in the movie scene where I take your hand and say, and darling, if you let me love you, and let me hold you, you'll see those tears run dry. And darling, if you let me love you, and let me hold you, you'll see those tears run dry. 'Cause love never gonna be easy. Because love is never gonna be easy.
All right.
What'd you think?
I haven't heard that song before. I enjoyed it.
Love that.
I have been introduced to new music on KDHX.
I'm an influencer.
Okay, well, one of the things we want to get to, and let's dive in with this. So one of the questions we received, not going to lie, I had a moment of just like, ooh,
Yeah.
as I read this question, but it's a legitimate question and one that we do want to answer. So the question is, when will Kelly and Gary acknowledge their central role in the structural racism present in the station?
Yeah,
I'm taking a deep breath right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, that's really, it's hard to face hard questions, and that is one, but it's also one that I want to talk about, I want to engage with and struggle with you and with everyone. And there are things that I've heard in other places this week, like the station still hasn't resolved things that happened in 2019, allegations of racism and things like that. And we need to talk about those things. We need to wrestle with those things. We have done a lot of that, and we need to talk about what that is. And it's very central to where we are today.
Yes. Just for those of you that don't know, in 2019, we were very explicitly called out for racism. And individually, I was individually. And that was a moment. And Gary, you and I were talking about it a little bit today. I remember thinking, how can this be happening to me? Yeah. I remember thinking, I've been the one that I thought was leading this for this station. What do you mean? How could I be being called out for this? And we felt that way as a board too. And wow, we spent some time, and ever since then we have grappled with this exact question.
Definitely. And I mean, if the question is how do we acknowledge how do I acknowledge my role in that? Well, let me tell you, my reaction to that was, this is preposterous.
Yeah.
Do you people know who I am and what I have tried to do in my life? I'm one of the good guys.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah.
I'm trying to help. Here I am helping you. How could you accuse me of supporting racism? That's my role in it. That was my reaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not very proud of that reaction, but you know what? So I feel like I now know a little better, and am trying to do better. And all of the things that we have gone through since then has helped that. I'm probably going to look back at where I am today sometime in the future and have some similar shuddering thoughts. Right?
May it be so. I mean,
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope so.
Me too.
So,
Me too.
Yeah, so that's a role right there. What did we do in response to that? There's been a lot that we've been through, and it was hard, and it was resisted by some people, including me.
I was just going to say, as you were saying resisted, I was like, wait, I feel like in some ways we went almost kicking and screaming into it. Not that we didn't think it might be the right thing to do, but I think as we have progressed through all of this, there was so much more that we didn't know.
Yes.
That on the regular, I have moments of just, whoa. Yeah. I've been propping that up while I've been trying to learn not to prop up things that keep KDHX or myself from being as inclusive or as broad in my thinking as I need to be. And, this is such a process of deep learning. I've learned a lot more about vulnerability because it is required to say, whoo, I thought I knew all these things. Mm-hmm. And then to regularly realize as we're trying to evolve and grow, there's still so much more to learn, and I'm messing up in it all the time. And I look back on 2019, and you're saying, that was my response, and I don't like that was my response. And when I look back on 2019, I realize I'm a different person than I was in 2019. I'm a different leader than I was in 2019. And this organization is a different organization than we were in 2019. And we need to continue to tell that story, and we need to continue to talk about what that means, because I don't in any way want to indicate that we have reached some form of self-actualization in this area. This is...
No.
Talk about a lifelong learning curve for an organization and for individuals.
Yes.
That's what this is.
Absolutely.
And we have so many areas where we still see that we need to do better and that we need to change. So explicitly, I remember, in 2019, when we were grappling with this, we had a conversation. It was me and some folks from the board. I actually can't remember everyone that was there, but we had a really kind of scary conversation. And I remember saying to y'all, do I need to resign? And let's talk about what it looks like for me to resign. Mm-hmm. Because we're in this space. And I mean, I'll be honest, as a middle-aged white woman, I'm in a space of it's the scariest thing that can happen, right? I got called out for being racist. Yes. And I sat there and said, I don't know what this looks like going forward, but maybe the easiest thing is for me to resign.
I thought that too.
Yeah.
For myself. I remember thinking the same thing. And yeah, that's hard to grapple with. But that's what we did grapple with it. And I do want people to know too, kind of putting my board governance hat back on rather than just some of the feelings that we're experiencing about this.
Sure.
and the personal growth and change. When things like that happened, and if they ever happen, the board has a responsibility to look at those things, to investigate them. We hired people to help us do that. Mm-hmm. We hired a law firm to interview people and find facts, and went through a process of really deep inspection and tried to understand everything as best we can. I'm not going to claim for 1 minute that everyone is going to believe with every outcome or agree with every outcome from that, but there was a very thorough and difficult and painful process that we did go through to try to address those things, and to make sure that we were acting as an organization in the most responsible and the best way that we can, and to learn and grow and change because of that. And then also, so that was kind of an immediate response, and then that also is what started our process of a long-term strategic plan process where we engaged hundreds of people in the KDHX world, not just community, but world, to talk to us and to give their feedback and to take surveys and to come to focus groups and to tell us what they thought of what we needed to do and how we needed to change.
Whew.
It's pretty hard to hear.
It was hard to hear. Well, and to be clear, we realized that we had an option. It would have been very easy, maybe easier. Yes, easier.
Here's our new DEI campaign.
Well, or here's our new executive director. Here's our new board. Right. This is, we sat there and we grappled and we grappled and we finally said, let's not do what would be the easiest thing to do, which is check a box and say, great, we took care of this problem.
Yeah.
Let's say, well, we can dig in and we can learn what we don't know, because regardless of investigations and those sorts of things, I publicly apologized in a blog post on kdhx.org. Y'all can go find it. Please do, because naming that we didn't know all the ways that we were contributing to the structural racism that was here at the station, and naming that we were committed to that journey. And that's what we've been on since then. But we very much said we have to actually do this if we're going to dig in and do it. And that's when we started really examining the history and reality of the station.
Right.
So when we talk about our what I would call a community-centric strategic planning process, and I know, strategic plan, that's
sounds
not
like mumbo jumbo.
Well, and I feel like, like maybe when I hear other people say it, I start glazing
Yes.
over like, wait,
Yes.
what are you talking about? But the idea was that we wanted to have a direction for this. We wanted to name commitments, and we wanted to say, this is what we're going to do. And we wanted to be accountable with community for doing it, with our listening audience. And we did have a community-centric process. As you mentioned, there were hundreds of people that gave input through surveys, through stakeholder conversations, through group meetings, and resoundingly, I went back and looked at some of those responses recently, and resoundingly, from our listening audience at the time, the response was, we want y'all to change this. We want you to dig in, and we want you to be accountable, and we want you to change this. And that's what we've been doing. The strategic plan was created, and I will say the board took a pretty solid back seat in that process.
Yeah, very much.
Y'all did not decide to guide it into what you thought it should be, because
that was not all like,
No.
out of a magnanimous gesture or anything, by the way. And to some extent that was because like we were not fully, I think, well, I'll speak for me. I remember not being fully on board with what we were doing and why yet. So some of that backseat was just because we weren't ready to or able to do it. But it was incredibly enlightening to see what the wider community said.
Absolutely. And that's precisely how the priorities in the strategic plan were created. And the second priority in that strategic plan is building anti-racist capacity.
Right.
And there's been a lot of work done to follow that plan. We very specifically keep those priorities front and center at every board meeting. We go through and we talk about where our progress is on the different priorities in the strategic plan. When I meet with the executive committee, and we talk about my goals, my own performance here, it is very much through the lens of how are we advancing these strategic plan priorities. And through all of it, the idea was that we knew we needed to make some foundational changes, because when we talk about structural racism or systems, we know that there are things we need to do. So we've had some very basic foundational work that's been done, although I would say perhaps not radical work, but it was done with a group of people that could give input so that it wasn't just a few of us making these decisions. But we have revamped all of our policies, our employee handbook, our conflict resolution policy, our anti-harassment policy, and took a deep dive into both where the organization had been, and then through the lens of racial equity, what does this look like to actually make these changes. We formed an operationalizing equity working group. That is a mouthful, and that sounds like some serious corporate speak right there, I guess, if you want to call it that. I'm air quoting in here. Right. But the idea was that these commitments we've made, we don't just want to say, oh, we made the commitments. Look how cool we are. Right. We wanted to say, this is how we actually put these into practice. This is what it looks like to make the commitment and to do it.
Right.
So that group went through, and actually we formed an anti-racist charter that you can see on KDHX's website that are our commitments to the type of organization we are aspiring to be.
Right. Which, by the way, I'll go back to, my own role in this and the growth and the change. Those are all things that I would have said we did not need to do. I didn't believe or see any need to do that 4 years ago. What is this charter? Why do we need to rewrite policies? We need to make sure that we're not like being discriminatory in our hiring practices. We need to make sure that we're not using offensive language to people. Like the basic easy stuff. Like, this is obvious. I know how to do this. Like, I know how to not be racist, right? I would have never acknowledged that these were important things that the organization needed to do.
Right.
And now here we are doing them, and there's a lot more. This is not done. There's a lot more.
Talk about aspirational.
But these were things that we have done. We have tried to take steps in that. We have taken steps in that direction, but we've grown. We've changed. We're not the same people. We're not the same organization. And you know what? When people have asked me about these changes, over the last week, and I've said, you know what, look, some of this is not consistent with having some of the same people resisting this. It's not consistent. We can't keep making those changes if we have people saying, because you must fire so and so or you must do this. It's just not consistent with staying on that path. It's a hard path to be on, and that's where it came from. I mean.
Well, and I think, too, in a lot of the ways, I mean, I'm very proud of things like having an anti-racist charter that will continue to evolve. I'm very proud of that we looked at our policies. But I think the thing that perhaps I'm more proud of are the ways we have changed how we make decisions and how we grapple with things. And I think we've moved to a place where we don't... let's see, how do I want to say this? We don't just make decisions anymore, for lack of a better way to say it. Every decision now, we are very careful to evaluate, why are we making this decision? Through what framework are we making this decision? Who is this decision serving? Do we have the right voices at the table? And as a result, decisions take a lot longer to make because there's a lot more to them. And I think those conversations that we've had as we say, okay, what are we missing here? What do we need to be considering? Do we need to go get some input because maybe the people at the table don't have the life experience or the perspective to be able to help make this decision in a way that really does support our priorities of the type of organization we want to be? I'm very proud of those, and I'm looking forward to a lot more of them. And, I know we've talked about how hard this can be, but a lot of those, I have moments where I do feel this impatience of, oh, come on. Can't we just decide to do this? Come on.
Right.
But I think we've learned, hopefully, a big life lesson is when we do that, we don't always have the perspectives and the voices at the table that we need. I will say, though, as far as perspectives and voices, we've seen a lot of success at KDHX over the last 3 years. I mean, since our strategic plan and since we said these are our commitments, I mean, obviously we were in some COVID years, and that kind of changed a little bit of everything as far as maybe how people were experiencing the radio or their connection to the radio. So we've seen a lot of growth. We saw a huge growth in listeners. We saw a huge growth in donations and supporters.
Yes.
There were a lot of ways where we could have said, oh, we've done this thing. We have this strategic plan. We're doing this foundational work, and we're growing, and we're successful because of it. And I think go ahead.
I mean, so one of the things that I've heard this week is, well, the station's falling apart, or either it's kind of the station's falling apart, or everything was great. Like, which is it? And it's not. The station isn't falling apart. The station wasn't falling apart. I mean, one of the things that was kind of quoted a little bit inaccurately on this week was about our financial position. But look, it was the financial position of KDHX was as strong as it's really ever been in any recent time, certainly my involvement, and I think yours too, at the beginning of this year.
Right. And
that was because of those additional listeners that are tuning in and sending us their donations from around the world. It's because of specific things that we did and changes that we made to eliminate debt. It's because of the generosity of a lot of people.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
All of that, it's because of looking at what are we spending our money on? How much are we spending it? What positions do we have on staff? What are we spending things on and other things and events and all of that? So we were that's accurate there. So why mess with that if that's true, right? Well, because that's not the work. The work is not just to have a strong balance sheet. That's not all it is. That's necessary, but it's not the work.
Well, and I think that's where our discussions have perhaps shifted a little bit this year as we've come out of COVID. We've had these increased listeners and even increased donors. We've done this foundational work. And I think what we've realized and started questioning is, are we creating community or are we creating an echo chamber? Mm-hmm. And that is a question that's a hard one and a little bit of a kick in the gut, because exactly as you're saying, we had reasons to feel like we were all cool over here.
Right.
And, I think when we look at just the history of KDHX and we look at things, we can say, okay, KDHX started out as a grassroots organization with the goal of putting, I think the original mission statement talks about marginalized voices on the air, particularly people of color and women. And then, over time, it's not that wasn't happening here, but I do think we have to acknowledge that over time, perhaps we didn't do that as fully as we thought we were doing that.
Yeah.
And so while we've kind of always had the idea of diversity in mind when we think about the programming at KDHX or maybe the people that are at KDHX, I think we have to acknowledge that there are volunteers involved with KDHX that are connecting to different areas of the community. But when I say the community, I mean the communities that make up the St. Louis area that have been here but haven't been the loud voices. And part of the ways I think that KDHX in general, and even us in the last few years, in our tenure here, contributes to that idea of the systems and structures, is that maybe we weren't actually listening to all the voices at the table, or asking for those voices to be at the table, or considering that maybe we needed to expand the table.
Right. Yeah, I think there's been one concept with that is it's not the same thing to be, playing the music of lots of different people is not the same as having them involved and having their voice here with us and helping us decide what happens. We're playing lots of different music. The KDHX has always played a lot of different music. There's music that you won't hear anywhere else. That's always, I think, been true. But that's not necessarily the same thing as having all of the communities present and a part of the organization. So that's something that I think it's hard to struggle with. I think it's important for us, and we have to continue to always evaluate how are we doing that.
Well, exactly. And I think, one of the things we've heard a lot in the last few months and weeks from some volunteers, and some listeners is, we're the community.
Right.
We're the community.
Right. I'm the community.
And yes, you are part of the community. Very much so. And there are a lot of folks in the communities that make up the listening community of KDHX. And so, as we think about what it looks like to have voices at the table, to make sure that we're considering perhaps voices that aren't always the loudest, but that do bring different perspectives, we have to name that no single person is the community.
Right.
And that no single group of people is the community. And that's hard, because in naming that, I think we do have to realize, and part of what we're experiencing is, yes, the answer is yes, we have created a bit of an echo chamber, even as we thought we were doing all this good work over here, because we're hearing from a small and homogenized community, both of volunteers and people that are out there listening. It does not dilute their passion or love for KDHX at all. But it does dilute the idea that individual perspectives or small groups of perspectives that are homogenized would speak for everyone. And that's something that we're wrestling with now.
Right.
I've had some I keep saying this. I've had some moments. I'm going to quit using that euphemism. I've had some moments this week where, I'm hearing a volunteer say, you haven't been in my community. Right. The way you connect to my community is me, but KDHX hasn't had a presence in my community.
Right.
When I came to do radio at KDHX, I understood that y'all started out as a small South City radio station and that you mainly served a white audience. I came here anyway. But if we're talking about expanding the table.
Are you going to come to me?
Right. Are you going to come to me? And that's a tough moment to hear too. And so we're in this process of evolving and growing. We're having to consistently and constantly say, okay, what do we need to evaluate here? How do we need to grow? How do we need to look at this differently? So as we grapple with what it looks like to move forward at KDHX, and we've been talking about a new vision for KDHX. In a lot of ways, that vision is a continuum of some of the work that we've been doing, but it's also a recommitment. That's how I'm seeing this idea of where KDHX moves forward.
Right.
It's a recommitment to continuing to examine how we show up in the different areas of St. Louis, how we show up even for folks who are already connected to KDHX, how we create access points, entry points for new volunteers, how we don't just recruit, say, new DJs from our same echo chambers, and how we say we do want to expand our audience, and it doesn't mean that we don't want to keep the audience that we've had.
Right.
It's not an either or. It's a how are we expanding?
Yeah, and we're going to have to do things that are intentional about opening up the points at which we can connect with people. We have to find other ways to do that. We need other organizations to tell us what they need and who their community is and who their participants are. We need other people that we haven't had involved before they're not just, we have to be intentional about that, to go and we have to make it safe for them to be here. And we have to think about the ways that we might not have always made it safe for them to be here in the past. And we have to, those are hard things to examine, but are we saying words that in trying to get to our vision are pushing people away from us? Are we doing that?
Right.
We have to call each other out when the answer is yes. We have to be growing and learning about that. That's important.
Yeah.
It's another way that it's certainly a change in how I'm looking at this and how I'm trying to grow. So it's not an easy process, but it's important.
I think that it's easy to conflate the idea that part of our strategic plan priority, one of the main ones, is building anti-racist capacity with every decision that's being made here.
Right.
And I think while, how I view it as building anti-racist capacity is a specific thing, but it also informs how we make decisions, how we want to be in community with each other, what it looks like to expand the table. There are also, decisions made that have more to do with what I would say is perhaps a byproduct of building anti-racist capacity, which would be what kind of culture are we seeking to create here at KDHX? And by that, I mean organizational culture. And by that, I mean how are we with each other every day?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how are we talking about disagreements? How are we moving through conflict? How are we decent with each other?
Yes.
And what does that look like?
Yes. And does objecting to a decision by demanding someone lose their job contribute to a culture where all voices can be heard and different opinions can be expressed? Or does it empower and does it allow the same power structures to continue? Which is that? That's hard to ask, but we've asked it.
It is the through line. It's the through line from being called out in 2019, deciding that we are going to actually transform this organization.
Actually change.
And not even knowing exactly what that looked like having some priorities, and we still don't know exactly what it looks like.
Right. We don't know every day,
we're still learning. We're still figuring it out. And in the past few weeks, we've learned more and more about what we're not doing yet.
Right.
And how much more we do have to dig in and work. And so that's what the idea of what KDHX for the future looks like, is a place where we are decent with each other, and we do work through conflict, and there are more voices at the table, and how we go about heading toward that culture is kind of ever evolving, in the sense of, not that we're not committed to it, but we learn more as we do that about, we learn more about conflict resolution. We learn more about what it means to disagree and still work together. We learn more about how we have different perspectives at the table, and we hear things we never would have thought, or we hear things that we thought we were good on, and then we find out, oh, whoa, I need to consider this. I had a moment yesterday in talking with a volunteer where I very specifically had to say to this person, I've done that. I didn't really realize I did that. Yeah. In fact, I did that recently.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't so much an act, but like a philosophy, a concept of perhaps like how I was engaging with people who have a different perspective than I do. Mm-hmm. So how we continue to evolve and grow together, and how we mark success for that is evolving, and also important to acknowledge that we do need to have those markers. And part of those markers are doing the work of our strategic plan, but also part of the markers are continuing to have a lot of different voices at the table and making sure they are given equal access to being able to inform where KDHX goes for the future.
Right. Wow. So it's a lot, right?
Well, it's a heavy responsibility, but also it's very exciting. Yes. And I think that's where we are right now. And I know that it may feel weird to be in this painful moment and also feel excited.
Yeah.
But those are very much two different things that I think, two different emotions that this organization is holding right now.
Yes.
And if we say we're going to do these things, we do have to follow them with action.
Yeah. So one of the things that one of the other questions that we got that I've been thinking a lot about was, I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have it in front of me, but it was a question to you and I: would we have done anything different in 2023 so far? And I've thought a lot about that. And I mean, there's a lot of things in 2023 I would have done different in many contexts, but I think one thing that I would do differently is to try to be more open and vocal about what we were thinking and what we were trying to do sooner. I mean, this is. I know we look cool and all, but this is kind of hard to do.
I'm guessing like most of the people listening don't think we look cool.
A long time ago, but no, I mean, this is really hard to just like be, to try to be open and to try to be honest about where we're going, and to say things that are hard for people to hear and hard about ourselves. But I wish we had tried to do that sooner, and we've done it in some contexts, mm-hmm. but I think we've probably needed to tell people a little sooner what was going on and why than we did. And that's one thing that I would do over.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we have had opportunities to share and explain in ways that we haven't, not just with volunteers, but with listening audience as well. Yeah. So I agree. I have moments where I do feel like KDHX is such a wonderful thing. Obviously, it's a jewel. It's incredible. Yeah. Like we say it all the time. There's no place like KDHX. And also at the same time saying, and we failed in many ways.
Yes.
And we failed in ways this year. And we failed in ways yesterday. And sure. And I don't say that lightly. But I do know that in failing, that's the path to discovery. That's where we learn, we could have done this differently. So,
and we're not going to define other people or ourselves by our mistakes, right? Like, we're going to make mistakes, and then we're going to try to improve, and let's
take the opportunity to learn from them and move forward. And in fact, in that way, failure almost becomes an oxymoron.
Right.
If what you're doing is you're learning and growing through it.
Right.
So, we have hopefully, we've talked a lot. So we've talked early about kind of where we are currently at KDHX. Mm-hmm. We've talked through where we've been coming from over the last few years, and hopefully, what's getting through is that we continue to make commitments and we want to stick to them, and we also continue to learn and grow and evolve Because even as we've made priorities, we know that those are going to need to shift as well if we want to truly live into what it looks like to serve an expanded idea of perhaps what we've had in the past of the KDHX community and how to do that. And so when we think about where we're going, we do have some ideas about how we want to specifically step into that new idea of KDHX. But I will say, along with a lot of those ideas, and it's not a new idea, it's a recommitment. It's to put a finer point on it. But a lot of those we've already identified based on folks saying, hey, this is where you could connect that you haven't connected before, with specific communities of people in KDHX, in St. Louis, but also we know that we're going to have to have more voices at the table and more guidance. So we're going to have to continue to be asking and not assuming and continuing to say, if we're going to think about doing this, who needs to help guide us into how we can do this in a way that works? And so I think, when I think about this recommitment here, that's really what I'm thinking is how many more people can be at this table to help guide what it looks like for KDHX to continue to be bold in our passionate service of our listening audience and our current and future listening audience, especially.
Yeah, it's going to be bold. That's for sure. It has to be bold, right? That's what we have to do.
Absolutely. Well, do you have, how are you feeling? Do you have more you want to share?
I want you to play a song for me.
Okay.
That's what I want.
Well, do we want to wrap up with a song?
Why don't we play a song and then we'll come back.
We'll come back and finish up. Okay.
Say our parting words.
Awesome. I'm going to play one that this is Rhiannon Giddens playing this song on her album that she did with a few other wonderful folks called Our Native Daughters. The album is Songs of Our Native Daughters. This one's called Music and Joy. All right, Rhiannon Giddens, Music and Joy.
That was pretty great. Thank you for sharing that, and your musical selections are inspiring to me, and like a lot of other things that you do. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
That was great, and it's nice to be able to play some music. People don't know this, but we send each other songs sometimes.
We
like,
do.
Hey, here's what I'm playing today, and
I
like that. I like having that. That dynamic. I do that with a lot of people. So, but that was great. So.
Well, we owe some gratitude to folks who have listened. We've been here actually longer than I thought we would. Clearly, there's lots to talk about, and we do want to, continue to take opportunities like this to answer more questions. We didn't get to everybody's questions today.
Right, there were a lot of great questions in here that we didn't talk about. I mean, some of them that we still want to answer them all specifically, but as we kind of close out, I'm thinking about what the next couple of weeks look like. I'm thinking about what the next few days look like. And, maybe we can talk a little bit about, some of the things about what are the programming changes? What are we going to be doing? What's going to be on the air? Things like that people asked about. So I'll kind of toss that in your lap as you're running this place.
Well, I'll give a quick answer to that. But one of the things that we are moving through pretty quickly is we have received a lot of DJ applications, and we have been receiving them over the course of the last few months as
keep them coming, right?
As we've opened up back up we've got our new training programs and all of that in place for new DJs. So we have a lot of folks in the pipeline and some who are ready to go ahead and join the airwaves. So over the next couple of weeks especially, we'll be hearing some new voices on the air. We'll be making some announcements about some of the new folks that are going to be joining us. So I think there will be a little bit of a different sound to some of what we hear here at KDHX. And we're excited to continue to add more people to the airwaves and in other volunteer positions as well. So that's the number one thing I would say as far as what things might sound like over the next couple weeks.
It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of exciting work too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, thanks so much for tuning in and listening. If you hung with us, we sure do appreciate it. And again, we hope that in these conversations that some of your questions may have been answered, and again, commit to continuing to take opportunities like this to be able to continue to answer, because we know there are things that we did not get to that we'll look forward to speaking to in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody listening, and all of the people that have been engaged with us, whether it's phone calls that we've received or emails or all the ways that you've communicated with us. I've read them all. I've listened to them all. Some really supportive and encouraging. Some exactly not that, but they're all important regardless. And so thanks for all that, and thanks for listening today, and thanks for having me in here and doing this.
Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. All right, we will get back to our regularly scheduled programming here on KDHX. Again, thanks to all of you who have brought your passion and your support to KDHX through the years. We sure do appreciate it.